Welcome to the Identity and Cybersecurity podcast. In this episode, host Ian L. Paterson speaks with Larry Whiteside Jr., co-founder and president of the International Consortium of Minority Cybersecurity Professionals, ICMCP. Larry has over 25 years' experience in the information technology and cybersecurity fields. In this episode, they discuss ICMCP, bringing diversity into the field of cybersecurity, automation and the cyber skill shortage, and focusing on being the steward to other people's data.
To give you context, right? ICMCP is an organization that I co-founded with some friends of mine in 2014. And the beginning of February, I basically took over as president, where I'd been on the board of directors. And so me taking over as president was in an effort to lead us into what I thought was going to be the new realm of change and action that's needed in order to really build diversity in the field of cybersecurity. So for me, that is by far the most important and passionate thing that I'm doing in my life, besides, having a family, being married, and raising kids. That's the thing that really drives me day to day.
So I'd love to get your feedback on this. We hire pretty regular basis. Like we're always hiring university co-op students, which is kind of like an internship. So we're typically taking in at least 2 new people per semester. Obviously, we're a growing company, so we have other positions that we hire for as well. What is the best way that I, as an employer in the cybersecurity field, can emphasize hiring minorities and women? How can I give them a disproportionately larger advantage relative to the white guy complex?
It's really a visibility issue, right? So, and it's a two-way visibility issue. It's employers' ability to have visibility into that talent pipeline, and it's the talent pipeline having visibility into the jobs that exist and are striving to do more diverse hiring, right? And so for you as an employer, I say partnerships, right? And so partnering with organizations like mine, partnering with organizations like WESIS, Women in Cybersecurity, WISP, Women in Security and Privacy, those types of organizations who have members that fit the demographic of what you're looking for, who are actively seeking roles, right? And so all 3 of those organizations I just mentioned have active partnerships in universities across the country and are doing things to try and be what I'll say the tie that binds those 2 collectives together, both the community that is looking to get roles and get jobs in the field that are minority and female, and then both the companies that are looking for diverse talent. From my perspective, I want ICMCP to be one of the, if not the, go-to entity that that companies who are looking to hire diverse talent in the cyber field go to. And then from a people perspective, for minorities and women who are looking to up-level themselves in the field of cybersecurity, I want us to be the go-to organization, because what I'm building is a skills assessment and training medium that is going to allow my members to assess their skills based on roles that they want, right? And so I'm looking to create something that's available for both entry level, whether you're coming out of high school, coming out of college, or transitioning from another career field, as well as those already in the field, to be able to say, hey, this is where I'm at today. Here are the gaps I have in my current skill set based on what I want to be tomorrow. And here are training partners that the organization has partnered with to give us free or deeply discounted training capability that if I were by myself, I'd have to pay 10x what I'm going to pay by being a member of this organization, right? So I'll give you an example. One of the companies that I won't mention yet until we come out with our release is their training is $2,500 a seat for their online training. And for us, I'll be able to offer it to our members for $125 a seat, right? And so when you think about what that means to somebody who's trying to up-level their skills and trying to get trained in certain areas, to be able to then go and get this training that they normally wouldn't be able to afford themselves, and if they went to their employer, if they have one, to be able to pay for this training, that would basically cut off their entire training budget for the rest of the year. And that the only thing they would be able to be trained on is that one thing, right? And so it's that type of organization that I'm trying to develop, to create for the membership that we have that is actively growing.
So the training and certification is a really interesting piece. I think one of the common questions that I receive / see online, like especially in Twitter, is certification. So what are your views on certs? And I'm thinking specifically around CISSP. Like, is that the one to start with? Do you recommend others? Obviously, it depends on what you're looking to do. But just from a general standpoint, what are you thinking?
Interesting. So I am the anti-cert guy, and I love ISC squared. I love ISACA. I personally have 0 certifications, and I got soured from them over a decade ago, 2 decades ago, for 2 reasons. One, the MCSC was one of the first certs to hit the market, and I used to throw out junk computers and have them in my trash. And one day, my trash guy comes and says, "Hey, I'm going to be doing what you're doing. I just got my MCSC." And that annoyed me, right? That was mid to late 90s. But then when the CISSP first came out, I actually had Harold Tipton, the author of the first security management handbook, teach a class of which I paid $5,000 per person for a 2-week class for me and 10 of my employees. And we went and took this class. And when we took the course, one of the things he said was, as we went through the 10 domains, that, hey, I'm not here to help you pass the exam. I'm just here to help you get familiar with the 10 domains. And then as we went through the domains, and I started thinking of the applicability of what all those domains meant to me from a professional standpoint, I didn't see the correlation, right? I don't need to understand the origins of Diffie-Hellman unless I'm going to be a cryptographer, right? And so when I started to look at all those things, and then I've watched the CISSP as well as some other certifications grow over the years in popularity, they became resume fodder. And they became resume fodder for HR. And it was really only there because that was a way that HR could weed out right stack versus left stack of resumes. So for me, it lost its fervor. It really lost the attraction of why it was originally created. And then I also looked at the practice test and the ambiguity of answers, right? When they would give you a question and the ambiguity of how the answers were, I just lost all respect for the certification bodies as a whole. Now, again, organizationally, they're friends of mine. We partner with them because there is value to them from the standpoint of, I'll say, continued learning and showing an ability to grasp and learn topics and certain things, right? But I think the long-term value of them is dying off quite quickly. I think things that are starting to become more valuable are SANS is growing for a reason, right? Because the deeply technical aspect of not only their certifications, but the testing to actually achieve a certification is far deeper than anything other than maybe the CCIE, right? Add to that when you look at the certificate bodies that are starting to be created, right? So CSA, the Cloud Security Alliance, started going down the path of, instead of creating certifications, they're going to create certificates. And the difference between a certificate and certification is this ongoing, hey, CPEs and continue to do what we'll call the mind-numbing aspect of maintaining relevance of the cert versus getting a certificate that shows, hey, I've got a competency in a particular area because I have a certificate, which is basically similar to a degree, right? But just in a small niche area. So the certificates, I think, add more value and lead to having more credence in the true purpose of what the goal is or was for certifications, which is showing competency, right? Because at the end of the day, when you're hiring someone, you just want to have a way to understand that they are competent in a certain area. And so if they've gained a certificate in a particular area, it shows competence. Where the certificates need to figure out their balance is what certificates did with the continuing education, but trying to do something that makes it applicable to the certificate that was gained. Because like with your degree, you graduated, right? I graduated a computer science degree in 94. Don't ask me to code today, right? Like if it's not in COBOL or Fortran or something that, I could probably pick up pretty easily, don't ask me to code today. So the certificates, if you go get a certificate in some aspect of cloud security or some aspect of incident management or something like that, working through how you go through to, if you got it 2 years ago, how is that still relevant today? How do you maintain some aspect of proficiency over time? But I'm not a huge certification fan because I know, and no offense to my alphabet soup folks, but I know a number of people who have the alphabet soup behind their name that are good book readers and good test takers.
So for somebody just coming out of school wanting to get into the industry, there is literally an alphabet soup of certification to choose from. What's your recommendation on a good starting point?
So my recommendation to everybody is first off, it depends on if you have to define coming out of school. We are one of few career fields that coming out of high school, you can still have a very good, lucrative career if you take the right path early, right? And so for me, depending on what you're coming out of directly correlates to what certificate or certification program you should go into to demonstrate capability. And that's what it comes down to, demonstrating capability. If you're coming out of college, but you don't have a technical degree, right? So going to CompTIA and Security Plus is going to get you some of that baseline knowledge, right? If you're coming out of high school, a Security Plus is going to add some baseline knowledge and understanding of the career field. Because when you think about it, some of the advanced degrees, certificates, you've got to have a certain number of years in the industry. You've got to have recommendations from other entities. So the Security Plus is really a get your feet wet type of degree. But what I tell people is focus on showing some of the things that you do in your private time. If you are truly passionate about the industry, right, you're going to have a home network where you've got Wireshark running and you are segmenting your network and you are doing packet capturing and packet analysis and doing, right. In my early days, even though I was an officer in the military, I had 26 systems on my home network in a server farm in the basement. And I was running multiple Windows systems and I was doing my own scanning of my network and breaking things. And so a lot of people who are truly passionate about this, whether they come out of high school or college, they're doing more work in their private time of practicing and playing and demonstrating and running Nessus in their private environments and doing all those things that they don't show. So I tell people, if you focus more on that, and focus more on these things that you're doing and playing around with. Do you have an AWS account where you've gone in and started playing with Kubernetes and the other things inside of AWS security architectures, right? Showing a lot of that goes way further than you getting a Security Plus even, right? It goes way further than you going down this path, because those are the things that hiring companies want to see and understand. The early days, what we're battling right now in the industry as relates to entry-level positions is HR. And it's no offense to HR. They've been operating in a certain way for so long. And it's hard for every company, whoever the security leader is in that company, to have the business acumen and clout to be able to help HR treat something differently. And so that's a conversation, though, that needs to happen, because how can you be looking for an entry-level position with 1 to 3 years experience? Those two things just don't go together. But that's a common factor we see. And it's not that the cyber team or the security team is asking for that, but it's part of the requirement that HR, as relates to their, quote unquote, entry-level positions, just puts in there as a staple. Oh yeah, 1 to 3 years and a bachelor's degree in something. Well, really, we don't necessarily need that. If I got a guy who's graduated high school, but has in his own house over the last 2 years built a segmented network and can get into detailed aspects of network segmentation, packet analysis, talk deeply about Wireshark, go into things about scanning and doing all those types of things, can get into cloud architectures, right? That person right? I would hire before someone with a college degree with a Security Plus all day, every day.
That's an excellent segue into the employer's side of hiring. I think that the stat I saw recently, it's probably gone up now, is 1 million cybersecurity jobs unfilled in 2020 just in the United States,
Right.
and going up. So if you're required to staff up either an existing security organization, or maybe you just get thrown into a new organization, you got to build a team from scratch, what are the tips and tricks that you're going to use to get that talent in there that you need to be successful?
Yeah, so the reality of what the job market is going to look like is going to change over the next few years as automation becomes more of a thing, right? So first thing is, I think the million jobs, I think there's it's a combination of reality and I don't even know what word I don't want to say fake, but there's some reality and some, non-reality to it, right? So
you're saying this.
I hate to use that word because of where it came from, but there's some aspect of this overabundance of jobs that they're talking about that they're using based on statistics that have happened over the last 10 years as it relates to job creations and threats. And so the reality is the introduction of automation into the world of cybersecurity that we've allowed, because automation is not new. It's just we've finally gotten to the point of realizing that we can no longer stave off in cybersecurity automation like we had been 6, 7, 8 years ago. Because when Cisco introduced automation originally, when they bought Protego, they were saying, hey, we can utilize this tool to create ACL rules and create firewall rules in our Cisco firewalls. Everybody about lost their mind. Like, no way I'm going to let a computer create rules in my security equipment. It's the end of everything, and I refuse to do it. Fast forward to 2020, and now over the last 3 years, automation has become everything because the amount of data that is being thrown at security analysts is just overwhelming. And so I think that the combination of data growth and what we're dealing with from a threat standpoint has got people pontificating that the number of jobs in security is just going to go like this. But in reality, coupled with automation, it's going to grow, but not quite at that rate. So when you're hiring people, it's a combination of helping to understand how much growth is reality, and then picking people that have a thirst for knowledge. In our field, the people that are the most successful are the ones who are curious and have a constant thirst for knowledge, right? They don't operate inside the box. They don't do things just because that's the way they've been told it's supposed to be done, right? If you think about all the innovation that's happened in security, it's been people who have looked at old problems and said the way we've been solving them is not necessarily the best way for us to do it moving forward based on the things that are now available to us today, right? And so that's what I look for and this is why I talk about people bringing up the things they do in their personal time as it relates to that curiosity in the field of cybersecurity. I use this one guy who to this date may be one of the best guys I've ever had on my team. This guy, he had an undergraduate degree, but his thirst for knowledge was so great compared to pretty much everybody I've ever hired in my 25, almost 30 years in this industry, because he was running his own AWS environments. He was running his own environments in Azure. And so there was nothing that I couldn't really approach him with that he wasn't already in his private time tinkering and playing and doing things just because he had a thirst for knowledge and curiosity. And so for him, he is a guy that no matter where I go, in whatever role I'm in, he is a guy I'm going to reach out to see if he's available and see if he's willing to come on board, right? Because, and I told him in his one-on-one, right, if I could clone you, right, today, like I would clone him 1,000,000 times over because he showed. Did he have any certifications? He had none, not a single solitary certification. When I actually hired him, he was working in development, right? He was working on the DevOps team, right? And doing some Q&A stuff. But when I hired him, and his boss was the one who recommended him to me, and when I started talking to him, and I recognized the level of curiosity that he had and how much of his own personal time that he was spending trying to understand all the different aspects of security and all these different layers, I realized that this is a guy, even with no certifications, even with an undergraduate degree and nothing that has to do with technology whatsoever, is going to be extremely valuable to the team. And he ended up being that greatly. So when I build the team, I look for more of those types of things versus the stuff that you see in front of you on paper. Yeah, sometimes job history is going to play a part, right? You want to know if somebody's got, multiple less than year stints in roles. You want to understand, because there's got to be an aspect of cultural fit into the team where I am a very personable guy. And so I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to talk to you about not just, work stuff, but family stuff. If you're married, how's your wife and kids? If you're a homosexual, how's your spouse? Like I am interested in the whole person. So for me, all of those, that thirst for knowledge and all those things are one part, but the whole person is a part of it too, because I recognize that anything I ask of you as an employee to do for me in this realm of cybersecurity, because there's no real hours set for us. Attackers don't say, the hours are only 8 to 5, so I'm going to make sure I only operate during that window, because that's not reality. I recognize that anything I ask of them can potentially impact their family. And so understanding them as a whole person is important to me. So in every organization I've been a part of, I have biweekly one-on-ones with every one of my direct reports. And that one-on-one is a combination of going over tasks, right? Because I'm about task management, not time management, right? Here's the tasks that you've been given. Where are you at with completing these tasks, right? But then how is work life? And then how is home life, right? I want to know if your kids have been sick. I want to know if your spouse has been sick. I want to know if your spouse lost their job. Those are things that, to me, matter to the whole person, because if it impacts you personally, it's potentially going to impact your job. And I want to be aware of those things, because if I give you something that's potentially going to impact your home life and you've got these other things going on, you're not going to be the best you. And so for me, I take all of those things into account. So I think I've built some pretty good, solid teams, and I've been very thankful for the opportunities I've been given. It's been fun. It's been a lot of fun.
So we've talked a lot about team building, which is important. I think if we were to zoom out a little bit, with team being one component, if you were thrust into a mid-sized financial institution, bank, hedge fund, asset manager, and hired as the CISO to help right the ship, what does your 30, 60-day plan look like?
It's funny. So every organization you go to, right, when you are stepping into the CISO role, every one of them asks you for a 30, 60, 90, right? And it goes sort of two ways. One, they give you a 30, 60, 90 guide plan of trying to, from an HR perspective, things they want you to do as a leader, right? But then they ask you for your 30, 60, 90 as it relates to what you're going to do as the new, cyber guy, right? Or person or whatever that leadership role is. And so for me, the first 30 days is really relationship building. When I step into an organization as a CISO, there's a good and bad side to being the CISO. The bad side to being the CISO is you're responsible for everything and own nothing. There is, if you build the right relationships and you are a people person and you are someone who is an influencer, there's a good side to that, because then you owning nothing means then you aren't ultimately responsible to fix the things that need to be done, right? You're just sort of acting in an advisory role to help the organization move forward, as long as you can develop a plan, right, to align those things. So for me, my first 30 days is always about building relationships, getting to know who the leaders are, getting to understand not just who they are as a person. Again, me being a relationship guy, I'm understanding them as a whole person, right? They have a family. They've been married X amount of years. They've got kids. They've got this, but also professionally, how are they incentivized, right? Oh, they've got $100 million P&L. Oh, on this 100, right? Their bonus is this way if they hit their numbers, right? Understanding all those things that incentivize them then allow me to create plans on how to communicate with them best as it relates to risks that get identified in their environment, right? Because then during that next 60 days, it's discovery, it's understanding, and these things sort of run in parallel. While I'm doing this relationship building, I'm asking my team to gather all information related to risk, right? About all the systems, all the technology, and all the data sets and everything across the organization that I need to be made aware of, whether it's from previous risk assessments that have been performed or whatever that may be, or maybe it's, hey, we need to perform a new risk assessment because this one is more than a year old, right? But it is doing that data gathering so I can then, in that 60 days, come back and start breaking this out and say, okay, based on these relationships I built, I know John runs this business unit and Nancy runs this, and the risks that were identified for these systems, those fall in John's area of responsibility and directly correlate to his revenue, and these correlate to Sue's revenue, and so forth. And so once I, in that 60 days, start carving those things out, I start having those conversations saying, hey, so these are things that have been identified. Let me help you move forward, right, appropriately. And because one of the things is, for the first 2 decades of this career field, we were looked at as the office of no. The way we treated businesses and organizations was we focused on telling them what they could not do. Right? They would come to us, or we would find out that this particular business unit was going to go off down the right hallway and turn right, and they wanted to do these different things, and we would say, nope, you can't turn right, and then we would go away. But we were never putting ourselves in a position to tell them, well, which way can they turn, right? They've got an objective. They've got business requirements that they need to do. They've got a $100 million P&L that they need to do because that's their job, right? So what are we doing to help them achieve that? And so over the last 10 years, we've done a good job as a field at the executive level of helping our business leaders understand that we are their partner. And so for me, in that relationship building in the first 30 days, part of getting to know who they are is also part of letting them know who I am and saying, hey, not here to stop you from doing what you do, but as I learn about how they're incentivized, I then help them understand how I can help them achieve those goals that they've got set, and achieving their profit goals, and achieving their retention goals, and achieving whatever those goals are that they are being measured against, and how we can do that without creating risk, right? And so when they hear that and hear that we are aligned and that I've got the same goals that you do, right? And I just want to be able to find ways to do it in a less risky way if there's risk that's present in the way it's doing it now, but still achieving those goals, they tend to be much more open. So when I come back in that next 30 days, which is now in the 60-day mark, they start looking and they start saying, okay, well, yeah, I didn't know these things exist. I didn't know that this was an issue, or I was told about this before, but I wasn't given a way that I could, as we move forward, change it or fix it or mitigate it in a way that wasn't going to negatively impact my ability to meet my goals. And that's when, in that third set of 30 days, is where we begin to strategize. Okay, now we've created this relationship. Now I've had that information gathering. Now we've sat down and talked about, here are the things I identified, right? And now I'm going to give you a chance to go back and sit with your teams to talk about this so we can prioritize these risks, and then we can start building a path forward, right? We can start building what's the low-hanging fruit that we can do? What are some of the basic things that we can do right now, right? From an IT standpoint, hey, CIO, do you have multi-factor on your cloud-based email? Oh, no. Well, how about we implement that? Because that right away will mitigate the threat of phishing immensely, right? But you would be surprised at how few organizations, just for something that simple, right, have not done multi-factor on cloud-based email. Like it is mind-boggling to me, because to me, it is a easy button thing with low impact, right? But when they hear multi-factor, because they don't dive into it, and they think, because of what it used to be cumbersome, you got to have this key fob, and you got right. It's a lot of overhead, and there's a lot of cost, and it's $50 per person for this key. People think that there's a lot of overhead associated with it, even though technically it's an easy button thing. So that last set of 30 days is really about then beginning to build that strategic plan to say, okay, this is what we currently know and where we're at, or hey, this is what we're starting to learn more. And now that we've built this relationship, being able to prioritize to build the plan for the next 12, 24, 36 months of how, as you innovate, we mitigate risks that currently exist. And then as you innovate and you've shared your strategy with me of where you're trying to go, I can help you mitigate risk in your new initiatives as you move forward while still achieving your goals.
So let me close with one final question, and I'll provide some air cover for this question. So what is the highest stress cyber incident you've been involved with, or that you've maybe heard from somebody else? And what were the takeaways from it?
So for me, I use the term, if you lie with dogs, you get fleas, right? And so I use that term because an incident I heard about, right, was one where a third-party healthcare entity was impacted in a way that, even though the direct organization was not impacted, so it was a third-party printing and labeling company that sent out information to the wrong people. Well, the information they sent out was about someone's clinical diagnosis that sort of gives you a scarlet letter, if you get where I'm going. So that clinical diagnosis going to the wrong people created a huge uproar for this entity. And it created an uproar because now these people who have the scarlet letter, whose information is now public to all these other people that may or may not know them, right? It's versus it being private and being sent to them is now out in the public. And you can't pull that back. Now, the entity that took the brunt for it was the larger entity that was responsible for the information. The entity, however, that had the incident that caused the mislabeling, because they had someone actually break into an environment where the database existed and swap tables. And so when they broke into the environment and swapped the tables, theoretically as a joke, I guess, I don't know, and that went out, of course, the people who were impacted went back to the larger entity and said, hey, how dare you? Why did you do that to me? How could you let this happen? Well, the larger entity, of course, then goes to the smaller entity that actually was the culpable entity who had the issue, right? And said, hey, what happened? But publicly, no one knew that the smaller entity was the one that was culpable. Publicly, no one knew that the smaller entity was even a component of this overall process, right? And so it's one of those, in today's realm of third and now, ultimately fourth party risk, right? You can even use the target scenario as a real world example, right? That everybody knows about. You've got to think about your downstream partners and the data that they access on your behalf or on your customer's behalf and what that interaction looks like. And you got to start being able to hold entities you deal with that deal with your critical information accountable. And it's got to be, you've got to hold them to the standards that you hold yourself to. And that means sometimes that you're not going to be able to do business with a mom and pop shop. And that may be unfortunate, but based on the criticality of your data, your ultimate responsibility is to the data owners, right? And so you are just a data steward, right? You are a steward of these people's data, whether it be financial data, whether it be health data, or any other PII. You're just a steward of it that's utilizing it for a certain purpose, right? To the benefit of the data owner. But organizations don't take things that seriously. So when they are outsourcing things, whether it be outsourcing to a call center in Europe, if you think about maybe 2 years ago, when there was the mass issue with the wiki pop-ups on people's websites that were being popped, and so it was a couple of third-party companies where that tool, they did not have good development processes in place that enabled them to really go through and secure that code when it came down to it. So now all of these third-party companies have injected this code into their web front ends to give the appearance of a live person sitting there, only for that to be hacked. And now attackers have got this and are asking questions and interacting with customers of all these large entities, right? And so I think third-party risk and accountability is one of the biggest areas of risk that our industry is going to continue to deal with. And I see it attempting to get better, but there are entities putting so much, I'll say, so much in the way of governance and other things that are, I'll say, I don't want to say dumbing it down, but taking it to a point where it's making it almost impossible to get down to the level of technology, get down to the level of what you need to get to the real technological risk that organizations have, right? Because we're still in this questionnaire phase. And we've got to because I can respond to a question. I can put a company together right now doing whatever, and I can respond to a questionnaire that literally I have Fort Knox. And Fort Knox may not be a great example because Fort Knox got hacked too by a buddy of mine. But I can give the appearance via a questionnaire that I am pretty much as strong as I want to be. And so it's until we get to a better model of not just attestation, but some real world, right? So the bit sites and some of those guys have started it based on, publicly available information that's out there and open source intelligence. But we've got to take it to that next level and get a little bit deeper and begin to really understand from a third-party risk standpoint, the inner workings of a lot of these companies that we're doing business with.
I love it. Larry, this has been phenomenal. Where can people connect with you online?
So I'm a pretty open book. So LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn religiously, or Twitter. So I'm Larry Whiteside, both of them. So Twitter is at Larry Whiteside on Twitter. And then on LinkedIn, I'm the only Larry Whiteside Jr. that exists. So pretty easy to find me.
There's only one.
Yes, so far.
Awesome. Thanks, Larry.
No problem. Thanks, man.
Thank you for joining us today on the Identity and Cybersecurity podcast, sponsored by Plurilock. Join us again next time for more insightful conversations about cybersecurity and digital identity in today's hottest industries. To learn more about behavioral biometrics and other advanced identity technologies, visit plurilock.com.